My name is Cara Whitfield. I'm 30 years old. I'm a structural architect based in Bristol. I thought I was unremarkable. I thought my life was quiet and ordered, the way I'd always wanted it. I thought the only drama I'd ever face was a planning committee rejecting a design. Then one phone call rewrote everything. It came on a Tuesday, 7:14 in the evening. I was still at my desk. I almost always was. My fingers were gray with graphite from a detailed sketch I'd been working on for a new community library in Clifton. A quiet building. A safe building. The kind of space that holds people gently. My mobile buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. This is Cara Whitfield. A woman's voice, tight with restrained frustration. Miss Whitfield, this is Ashgrove Primary. Your daughter hasn't been collected. It's been 3 hours. I stopped breathing. My pencil rolled off the edge of the desk and snapped cleanly on the floor. You've got the wrong number, I said. I don't have a daughter. Silence. Then the woman exhaled. A long, exhausted sound, the kind that carries the weight of a very long day. Is this Cara Whitfield? Flat 12, Pemberton Road, Redland? Yes, but then she's yours. She's right here. She's the last child in the building, Miss Whitfield. We've been ringing for hours. My first thought was that it was a prank. My second thought was, why did she sound so absolutely certain? I'm telling you, I said again, I do not have a child. She's been asking for you. By name. I hung up. I sat there. My heart was going too fast. I stared at the half-finished library sketch on my desk, at the clean lines and precise angles. My world was precise. I knew every inch of my own life, but I grabbed my keys. I don't know why. Instinct. Proof. I had to see the face of the lie before I tell you how everything turned inside out. Welcome to Serene Drama Stories. If you're new here, subscribe. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. The drive to Ashgrove Primary was 12 minutes. It felt like an hour. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The October rain was heavy and relentless, the kind Bristol does so well, thick and gray and absolute. The wipers worked frantically against it, screech. Thud, screech. Thud. I kept telling myself the same thing, clerical error. Administrative mix-up. Someone with the same name? It happens, it does happen, Cara, it happens. But the woman's voice kept returning. She's asking for you. By name. How could a child ask for someone she'd never met? Maybe it was a scam. But what kind of scam used an actual school at 7 in the evening in the rain? I turned into the car park. It was empty except for a silver Volkswagen parked near the entrance. The main building was dark. One light on. The office. I sat in the car for a full minute. My heart was high in my throat. Go in, prove them wrong. Go home. The rain hit my face the moment I opened the door. I hadn't brought an umbrella. I never remembered to. I ran to the main entrance and knocked on the glass. A figure appeared from inside. She looked at me for a moment, then unlocked the door. Thank God, she said. She was in her 50s. Neat gray hair pinned back. A burgundy cardigan with a name badge that read Mrs. Alderton. She looked exhausted in the way only teachers at the end of a very long day can look. I'm Cara Whitfield, I said. Water was dripping from my hair onto the linoleum. I think there's been a serious mistake. I'm not a mother. I don't have a child. I've never had a child. Mrs. Alderton did not look surprised by this. She looked sad, actually. She crossed her arms gently over her cardigan and looked at me the way people look at someone standing in denial of something obvious. You're telling me you've never seen her before? Seen who? I don't know who you're talking about. She's been here all day, Mrs. Alderton said, and the tiredness in her voice had shifted to something firmer now. She had a full day of lessons. No one came at 3:30. We rang the number on the emergency contact form. Your number. She's just down the corridor. What form? I've never filled in any form. Mrs. Alderton said nothing. She simply pointed. The school corridor was dim. The overhead lights were off. Only the emergency strips along the skirting boards gave off a pale amber glow. The lockers were that particular institutional green you only find in primary schools. The smell hit me immediately. Floor polish, damp coats, and the faint, warm ghost of school dinners. And at the end of the hall, on a long wooden bench beneath a board covered in children's paintings, sat a little girl. She was small, terribly still. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, her feet in small pink trainers hovering above the floor. She was wearing dark jeans and a lilac anorak. Beside her on the bench was a little rucksack, shaped like a white rabbit. I didn't move. Mrs. Alderton stood behind me, watching, waiting. "Go on," she said softly. I took a step. My shoes squeaked on the floor. One small sound, the little girl heard it. Her head lifted. She turned. All the air left my body. I stopped walking. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It was my face. It was my face looking back at me from the end of that corridor, my dark blonde hair. My eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that people always called unusual, almost too light for the shade. The color of sea glass. I had spent 30 years looking at those eyes in a mirror. I knew them completely. And then I saw it. Just above her top lip, slightly to the left. A small white scar. A thin vertical line, barely a centimeter. I have had that scar since I was 7 years old. I was at my grandparents' cottage in the Cotswolds. There was an old wooden swing in the garden. I tried to jump off whilst it was still moving. I misjudged it completely and caught the metal chain bracket on my way down, face first. I had seen that scar every single morning for 23 years. This little girl had it. My hand rose slowly to my own mouth. I pressed 2 fingers against my lip, against my scar. The little girl looked at me from the end of the corridor. She was not frightened. She looked relieved in the quiet, controlled way of a child who has been waiting a very long time and has finally decided that the waiting is nearly over. She slid off the bench. She took one small step towards me, and then she said it. "Mummy." Not a question, not even a plea, a statement. The most matter-of-fact word I had ever heard, spoken in the smallest possible voice. "No," I whispered. I took a step back, my shoulder bumped into Mrs. Alderton. "No, I don't know you. This isn't possible." The little girl's face changed. She didn't cry. She simply looked lost, the way children look when the world doesn't behave the way they were told it would. Her eyes filled and the tears stayed there, balanced, not falling. "But Daddy said you'd come," she whispered. A man appeared from the office doorway. He was wearing a lanyard and a tired tie. "Mr. Pemberton," Mrs. Alderton said. "The head teacher," he clarified, looking at me with a careful, measured expression. "Miss Whitfield, we're very glad you're here. We were growing extremely concerned about Maisie." "Maisie," I repeated. The name was meaningless to me. "I am not her mother," I said. My voice had begun to shake. "I have never seen this child before tonight. Something has gone very wrong here. I don't know whether it's a mistake or something worse, but she is not mine." Mr. Pemberton frowned. He glanced at Mrs. Alderton, then back at me. "Miss Whitfield, I hear what you're saying, but this child was enrolled here last September by a man who listed you as her primary carer. He enrolled her using your name, your address, and your telephone number. A man who listed as the father. Come through." He led me into his office. The little girl stayed in the corridor. He opened a manila folder on his desk and turned it to face me. The enrollment pack was thorough. Emergency, contacts, medical history, dietary requirements, consent forms, and at the top, in the primary guardian box, my name, Cara Whitfield, my address on Pemberton Road, my mobile number. And my signature. I know my own signature like I know my own face. The fast looping C, the decisive cross of the double F. It was specific and it was mine. Exactly mine. I had never written it on this form. "This is a forgery," I said. My voice had gone very quiet. "Miss Whitfield," Mr. Pemberton said carefully, "that's an extremely serious accusation. The reality before us is this. This child is here. She believes you are her mother. Your name is on this paperwork. We have been attempting to contact you for hours. I cannot keep her here indefinitely, and I cannot release her to anyone not on this form." He paused. "That means you are the only person I can release her to tonight." He had trapped me, entirely reasonably. He had trapped me with logic and a forged signature. I looked back down the corridor. Maisie was still standing there. She had retrieved her rabbit rucksack and was holding it in front of her with both hands. Waiting. What would I tell the police? That a child with my face and my scar was calling me mummy in a school corridor? They'd send round a family liaison officer and a well-meaning social worker. And Maisie would end up in emergency foster care overnight frightened in a strange house. I could not do that. I had to solve this properly. "All right," I said. My voice was flat. "I'll take her." Mrs. Alderton let out a long breath. I signed the collection register. I signed my real name, my real signature, directly beneath the forged one on the form. I held them side by side for one moment. They were identical. I walked back to the little girl. "Hi," I said. My voice came out wrong, too bright, too careful. "Hi, Mummy." "My name is Cara," I said gently. "You can call me Cara." She looked uncertain. "Okay." I reached out my hand. She took it. Her hand was small and warm, and it fitted into mine with a naturalness that made my chest do something I didn't understand. I walked out of that school holding the hand of a child who had my face and my scar and no explanation. We got into the car. I didn't have a booster seat. The thought arrived and then dissolved. I couldn't think clearly enough to process it. I strapped her into the back seat. She sat very straight and looked out of the window at the rain. The drive home was quiet. Just the wipers. Screech, thud. In the rearview mirror, I watched her. She was watching the wet streets go past, perfectly calm, as if being collected by a stranger were simply a Tuesday evening. "Are you hungry?" I asked. The silence was too heavy. "Yes," she said very quietly. "What do you like?" She considered this with great seriousness. "Pasta." I stopped at the Tesco Express on White Ladies Road. I ran in. Pasta, pasta sauce, milk, apple juice. A packet of chocolate biscuits. The woman at the self-checkout glanced at Maisie. "She's lovely," she said, smiling. "Mini version of you, isn't she?" I just nodded. I couldn't form words. I drove to my flat. My quiet, ordered, adult flat, white walls, concrete floors, architectural drawings pinned to a corkboard, a bookshelf full of Zaha Hadid monographs and structural engineering textbooks, 2 wine glasses, 1 set of nice plates. I held the door open. Maisie walked in. She stood in my hallway, her wet anorak dripping on my floor. She looked around at the high ceilings, the glass coffee table, the drafting lamp. She held her rabbit rucksack in front of her like a small shield. "You can put your bag down," I said. She put it by the door carefully. "Are you still hungry?" "Pasta. I can definitely manage pasta." She nodded. I went into my kitchen. I found the saucepan I'd received as a flat-warming gift 3 years ago and used twice. I boiled water. I found pasta in the back of the cupboard. I opened a jar of tomato sauce. My hands were moving on automatic while my mind was somewhere completely else. When I turned, she was sitting at my dining table, both hands in her lap, watching me. "What's your name?" I said. I needed to hear it again. "Maisie." "Maisie. That's a lovely name." I paused, stirring the pasta, my back to her. "What's your surname, Maisie?" Silence. "Maisie." "Renshaw," she said softly. The wooden spoon hit the edge of the pan and clattered onto the hob. Renshaw, it was not an unusual name. There were thousands of Renshaws. It could be entirely coincidental. But the scar, the eyes, the forged signature. "Maisie," I said carefully, turning around. I kept my voice gentle. "Who normally collects you from school?" She looked at her hands. "Daddy." "And what's your daddy's name?" She looked up at me. Those gray-green eyes. My gray-green eyes. "Marcus," she said. The wooden spoon was still in my hand. I set it down on the counter very slowly and carefully, because if I didn't, I would drop it again. Marcus. Marcus Renshaw. Not a ghost, a bomb. My past had just walked into my kitchen wearing a lilac anorak. Marcus Renshaw was not simply someone I had once known. He was the man I had planned to build my entire life with. I met him 8 years ago at an architecture firm in Manchester where we had both recently started. He was from Edinburgh originally, dry, wickedly funny, brilliant in the peculiar way of people who make everything look easy. We used to eat terrible sandwiches on the steps of the Arndale car park at lunchtime and argue about brutalism. We fell in love over building plans and bad coffee and long evenings in pubs off Deansgate. He knew everything about me. He knew the story of the swing. He used to touch that scar on my lip with his thumb, this tiny gesture he did when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He knew my handwriting. We used to sign each other's birthday cards as a joke. He'd do a perfect imitation of my signature and hold it up, laughing. "I could be you," he'd said, and I'd laughed too, because it was funny, because I trusted him completely. He was my person. And then, 6 years ago, he simply ceased to exist. It was a Wednesday. I came back from a site visit in Birmingham, and the flat we shared in Didsbury was empty in a way I had never experienced a flat being empty. His clothes were gone, his books were gone, his drafting equipment was gone. His coffee mug, the chipped blue one he refused to throw away, was gone. On the kitchen table was a note, "I'm sorry. This is best for both of us." I called his mobile. Out of service. I went to the office the next morning. My manager looked at me with a carefully neutral expression. "Cara, he handed in his notice last week. He said he was relocating." "Where?" "He didn't say. He was gone. He took 6 years of my life and left 5 words. I grieved properly. I cried for months. I stopped eating properly. I nearly took a job in Dubai just to put distance between myself and every Manchester street corner that had his ghost on it. I didn't. I took the Bristol job instead. I moved south. I rebuilt everything. I buried Marcus Renshaw so completely that he had become almost fictional to me, a character from a life that had happened to a previous version of myself. He had sent a child. I looked at Maisie. She was watching me from the table, a little uncertain. "How old are you?" I asked. 5, she said. "I had my birthday in June. 5 years old. He left 6 years ago in late September. The mathematics was there immediately. The terrible, impossible arithmetic. He had left in September. A baby born the following June would be. No, I was not pregnant when he left. I would know. A person knows their own body, their own history. I would remember. I would have the proof, the records, I was not pregnant. But the scar was real. The pasta had overboiled. Water was hissing on the hob. I grabbed the pan too quickly and burned my fingers, dropping it. Pasta slid across my kitchen floor. Maisie made a small, frightened sound. "It's all right," I said immediately. "It's all right, I'm sorry. I got a fright. I'm fine." I made her toast with butter and cut it into triangles. She ate it slowly, watching me over the edge of her glass of apple juice. I sat across from her. My mind was already moving. "Maisie," I said carefully, "what did Marcus tell you about me?" She chewed. Put her toast down. "He said you were my mummy. He said you were very busy with your work. He said you were poorly for a long time, but that you loved me very much." I kept my face still. "He had photos of you," she added. "Photos." My voice stayed level. "In a box. He said you were a secret. He said I couldn't meet you yet. But he said if he ever had to go away on a very long trip, you'd come." There it was. Constructed, deliberate. He had built a mythology around me, an entire careful story. The absent mother. Unwell, overwhelmed, too buried in her career to be present. The tragic woman who loved her daughter from a distance. He had made me the missing parent. He had made himself the devoted one who stayed. He stole my name and my story, and he made himself the hero of both. "He's wrong," I said. Maisie looked at me. "Wrong about what?" "About me." I took a breath. "I wasn't poorly. I wasn't too busy. I didn't know you were here." She considered this for a long moment with the focused gravity of a 5-year-old weighing something important. Then she picked up her toast again. That night, I made her a bed on my sofa with the best sheets I owned. I found an old fleece blanket at the back of my wardrobe and tucked it around her. She was asleep in minutes, the rabbit rucksack sitting on the floor beside her, one ear visible above the armrest. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I was shaking, but it wasn't fear. The shaking was something colder, something clarifying. My old life was behind me. Whatever was coming next was already in motion. I was going to find out what he had done. I was going to find out how he had done it, and then I was going to find him. Maisie slept. The flat was dark except for the blue light of my screen. I am an architect. My entire professional life is built on one discipline. I look at structures. I find the load-bearing elements. I find the points of failure. I find where the truth holds and where it cracks. This was a structure. Marcus had built it. I was going to take it apart. I started with my own life. I needed to anchor myself to what was real. I opened my work calendar and went back 6 years. The September he disappeared. I had been in Birmingham on a site visit, then Sheffield, then a week of late nights finishing tender documents. I was not pregnant. I was not unwell. I was just overworked and exhausted, and I had no idea my partner was dismantling his life and leaving mine. I went forward. The following spring, June, that would be when Maisie was born, according to her age. I scrolled to June of that year. There it was. The week of the 14th. I had been in London for the entire week. The Wellington Street commercial project. I had the train tickets, the hotel booking, the meeting confirmations, the client dinners. It was my first major solo project after moving to Bristol. I remembered it completely. I had rung my mother from a coffee shop in Covent Garden to tell her we'd won the commission. I was not in a maternity unit. I was not anywhere near a maternity unit. This was my anchor, my proof. I went further. Bank statements, credit card records. I went back through the months surrounding Maisie's birth. Everything was where I expected it. Trains, cafes, Tesco, building material suppliers, the occasional Marks and Spencer lunch. And then I found it, my old credit card. The one I'd opened in Manchester and barely used after I moved. March, 2 months before Maisie would have been born. A charge. Bristol Royal Infirmary. Private patient unit, consultation fee, £180. I stared at the screen. I had never been to the Bristol Royal Infirmary that March. Not for a private consultation. I would remember. I would have a record. There was nothing on my calendar, nothing in my diary. It was 3 in the morning. I called the hospital. The overnight operator transferred me to records. A groggy clerk answered. I need to speak to someone about private patient records, I said. I think my identity has been used fraudulently. The word fraudulently woke her up. She told me to come in person and fill out a formal request. I told her I had a child with me and I needed something tonight. I told her I was very concerned. I gave her my NHS number, my date of birth, my address. I may have been less than entirely truthful about my recollection of the appointment in question. I may have implied I was simply trying to recover memory of a difficult time. She put me on hold. The hold music was something that sounded like a lift in a mid-range hotel. I stared at Maisie's sleeping shape. The small rise and fall of breath. The clerk came back. I can email you a discharge summary. Just the summary. You'll need to come in for the full record. This is outside protocol, but given the circumstances... Yes, thank you, please. I gave her my email. I sat refreshing my inbox. Retdef, refresh, refresh. The email arrived. I opened the PDF with hands that had gone very cold. Cara Whitfield. Date of admission, 14th June. Date of discharge, 16th June. Ward, maternity. Bay 4. Physician Dr. S. Okafor. Patient discharged stable. Female infant, 7 4 OZs. Father, not listed. I read it 6 times. Someone had checked into a maternity ward as me. Someone had given birth using my name, my NHS number, my address. While I was in London presenting an architectural pitch to a room full of suits, a woman I had never met was in Bristol delivering a baby in my name. I scrolled down. A scanned handwritten nursing note. Pot is very anxious. Refuses to provide father's details. States she is frightened. Fears for infant's welfare. Patient was insistent that the child's father must not be contacted or notified. States he would destroy everything. It was a performance. A carefully prepared script acted out in a maternity ward. The woman had played the role he had written for me. The unstable, frightened mother hiding the baby from the father. She had walked in, delivered the lie, and walked out. He had been building this story for years. If I ever came looking, he had already written my character. The records said I was the one who was volatile. The records said I was the one who had hidden the baby from the father. He hadn't just taken my name, he had taken my narrative. But if I wasn't in that ward, and I was in London, I have the train tickets. Then who was? And if the woman in that ward wasn't me, why does Maisie have my face? Why does she have my scar? The answer was forming in the back of my mind, somewhere dark and quiet. I could feel its shape. I didn't want to look at it directly yet. Not yet. I needed to know for certain. Maisie woke the next morning to unfamiliar surroundings and handled it with a composure that made me ache. She sat up on the sofa, looked around my flat, and said, "Can I have some cereal?" I bought cereal while she slept, and orange juice. And a small bunch of bananas, because I'd noticed she'd looked at the fruit bowl. while she ate her cereal at my table, watching something on my laptop that involved a great deal of animated singing, I stood at the kitchen counter with my coffee and watched her. The scar, the eyes, the hospital record. I told myself I wouldn't do it. It felt invasive. It felt grotesque. She was a 5-year-old eating Rice Krispies. But I had to know. "Maisie," I said brightly, "shall we go on a little adventure? We need to pop to the chemist." She looked up. "What for? It's a surprise." She accepted this. I took her hand and we walked down to the Boots on White Ladies Road. The day was gray and damp and smelled of wet leaves and bus exhaust. Classic Bristol October. She held my hand with no particular self-consciousness and pointed at a dog tied up outside the bakery. I bought a home DNA collection kit, maternity testing, peace of mind test. I also bought a coloring book about dinosaurs and a pack of felt tip pens. "What are those for?" she asked, pointing at the DNA box. "Science," I said. The woman behind the counter smiled at us warmly. "Is this your little one?" "Yes," I said. The word came out without my planning it. It sat in the air between us and I didn't take it back. We went home. I gave her the dinosaur book and the felt tips. She sat on the floor and began coloring with focused intensity. I went into the kitchen. I opened the kit. Cheek swabs, envelopes, prepaid laboratory mailer. I went through to the sitting room. "Shall we play a silly game?" She looked up. "What game?" "It's a science game. I just have to do this." I held up the swab. "On your cheek, it tickles." She giggled. "Okay." I swabbed her cheek. My hand trembled slightly. "My turn," I said too lightly. "I'll do myself in the bathroom, bit more private. Very serious science." I locked the bathroom door. I looked in the mirror. My eyes, her eyes, my scar, her scar. I swabbed my own cheek. I sealed both envelopes. I put them in the prepaid mailer and put on my trainers. "Back in 2 minutes," I told her. "Keep coloring." I walked to the post box on the corner of Pemberton Road. I stood there holding the envelope over the slot. If I post this, I thought, there's no going back. If it matches, how is any of this possible? If it doesn't match, then who is that little girl with my face watching a dinosaur coloring book on my sitting room floor? I let it go. The envelope dropped. The sound of it hitting the bottom of the box was very final. The website said results within 10 working days. Those 10 days were the longest of my life. I worked from home. I told my project manager it was a family matter. The word family sat strangely in my mouth, wrong-shaped, unfamiliar. He was understanding. He asked no questions. I took care of Maisie. She was less quiet now, less the small, still figure from the bench. She relaxed into my flat like she'd been given permission to take up space. She spread her coloring books across the sitting room floor. She rearranged my bookshelves without asking. She informed me solemnly that my coffee table was dangerous and ought to be moved, which was frankly fair. We fell into something resembling a routine. Breakfast together. I worked at my desk in the mornings while she colored or watched things on my laptop. We went to the park in the afternoon regardless of weather. She had a robust relationship with puddles that my good boots did not share. She laughed. Not the cautious, restrained responses of the first night, but proper laughing, sudden, generous, with her whole face. She was stubborn when it suited her, soft when she was tired. She told long and only loosely coherent stories about her friends at school. She refused, categorically and without explanation, to eat peas. She was a person. She wasn't a puzzle or a problem. She was a small, particular, specific human being. I was terrified of the results. I was terrified she wasn't mine. And I was more terrified she was, because if she was, how? My mind kept returning to a conversation I'd had with Marcus years ago in Manchester. We'd been drinking wine in our flat in Didsbury on a Friday night. I was in the middle of one of my habitual spirals about the future. I want a family, I'd told him. But I also need to make partner before I'm 40. What if I leave it too long? He'd looked at me over his glass. We have time, but I was thinking, maybe I should look into freezing my eggs, just as a safeguard. A backup plan while things are still optimal. He'd smiled. That's very you, he'd said. Always building the contingency. I went to a consultation at a private fertility clinic in Manchester. I filled in forms, a great many forms. Marcus came with me, held my hand in the waiting room. helped me understand the paperwork. He sat next to me while the consultant explained the procedures, the consent requirements, the legal documentation. I signed things, several things. I got busy. The Manchester Tower project landed, and then the tender, and I never went back. I told myself I'd rebook in the spring. I could be you, he'd said. He didn't just forge my name on a school form. He went back to that clinic. He used the consultation records, consent forms, the signature I had left behind. He had watched me sign my name dozens of times. He knew it perfectly. He had told me so, laughing, holding up his imitation. He didn't use an actress for the hospital records. He used a surrogate, a real one. A woman who carried a pregnancy through to full term using my genetic material, which he had retrieved and used without my knowledge or my genuine consent. He had stolen something from me that had no name in law, something deeper than fraud or forgery or even theft. He had reached into my future and taken a person from it. He had created a life using my body without my body ever being present. This wasn't a custody dispute. This was a theft of the most profound kind imaginable. He hadn't just taken my past. He had taken my future. He had taken my daughter. The email came on a Monday morning subject. Your DNA results are ready. Reference CW441. I was sitting in my car outside the Tesco Metro, where I'd taken Maisie for a treat the previous afternoon. I couldn't open it at home. Not with her there, watching me with those eyes. The morning was cold and clear. November's sun making everything look sharper than it was. I opened the email on my phone. I followed the link to the secure portal. My hands were steady. My whole body felt very still, the way it does in the moment, before something either holds or collapses. Maternity DNA results. Mother sample. Cara Whitfield. Child sample. Maisie Renshaw. I scrolled past the confidence intervals, the allele tables, the scientific language. I went directly to the number, probability of maternity, 99.97%. I sat in the car, sat there for a long time. Outside, a man walked past with a dog on a lead. A woman in a yellow coat unlocked a bike. The world continued, entirely indifferent. She was mine. He had taken her before I ever knew she existed. He had stolen her from my future. From a clinic where I'd signed paperwork in a rush because I trusted him. From a sequence of decisions I'd made in the company of a man I thought was my person. She was mine. The confusion was gone. The shock was gone. What remained was a silence so total it felt like the inside of a completed building. The moment when all the scaffolding comes down and the structure stands on its own for the first time. I was not a victim. I was a mother, and I was going to get my daughter. I did not go to the police first. I thought about it carefully, and I decided against it. If I went to the police, Marcus would be arrested. Fraud. Identity theft. Child abduction by deception. It would become a case, a news story, a catastrophe. And Maisie, who had done nothing, who was entirely innocent, who had grown up calling this man daddy. She would be at the center of it, the stolen child, the manufactured baby. Her origins turned into a headline. She would be the story. I would not do that to her. I am an architect. When something needs demolishing, you don't take a sledgehammer to load-bearing walls. You study the structure first. You find the precise point of failure. You plan the demolition so that only what needs to come down comes down. I needed a professional. I found a private investigator through my solicitor's recommendation. A former detective sergeant named Barry Frost, who operated out of a small office above a print shop in Clifton. He was in his late 50s. Quiet manner. Sharp eyes. I sat across from him and gave him only what he needed. I need to find a man, I said. I slid a card across his desk. It had Marcus's name, his last known address, Janchester, and the address of Ashgrove Primary. He abandoned his 5-year-old daughter at this school 11 days ago. I currently have the child. I need to know where he is now. Barry Frost looked at the card. Your connection to him? We used to work together, years ago. And the child? I met his eyes. DNA confirms she's mine. He absorbed this with the professional equanimity of a man who had seen most things. I'll have something in 48 hours. He had it in 30. The call came while Maisie and I were on the sitting room floor doing a jigsaw of the solar system. She had claimed Saturn before I could and was very pleased about it. I stepped into the kitchen. "He's not at the Manchester address," Barry Frost said. "He moved out the same day you collected the child. He's renting a place near Cheltenham, Long Barrow Road, number 7. He's paying cash. He was running. He had left her on a bench like a piece of leftover baggage and driven south." "Send me your invoice," I said. I hung up. I looked at Maisie. She had found Jupiter and was holding it up triumphantly. "Mummy's got a very boring work meeting to go to tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to ask my friend Jess if you can go to hers and play with Freya." "Does Freya have Lego?" Maisie said. "I'll ask." Jess was my colleague from the Bristol office. Single mother, daughter the same age as Maisie. The moment I rang, she said yes without hesitation and asked no questions except one. "Are you all right, Cara?" "I will be," I said. The drive to Cheltenham was an hour and 10 minutes on the M5. I left at 7 in the morning on a gray Wednesday. Maisie was safely at Jess's house, wearing a borrowed pair of Freya's wellies because she had wanted to, and the logic of this had been entirely unassailable to both of them. Long Barrow Road was on the fringes of a quiet suburb. Large detached houses, long driveways, the kind of street that seemed designed to project the appearance of a settled, peaceful life. Number 7 had a neatly kept garden. A hire car in the driveway, the sticker still on the back windscreen. I parked. I sat for a moment. My heart was not racing. It was steady, deliberate. The same rhythm I feel in the moment before presenting a final design, unhurried, certain. I rang the doorbell, movement inside. A pause, then the lock. He answered the door. He looked diminished. Thinner, his face drawn. His hair was too long and he hadn't shaved in days. He was wearing a jumper I recognized from Manchester, the dark green one he used to wear on Sunday mornings. The detail of it was briefly unbearable. He saw me. He was not surprised, not even slightly. He had been waiting for exactly this. "Cara," he said. "Marcus." He tried a smile. It was terrible, wet and frightened and wrong. "You found her," he said. "Not you found me, you found her." "She's not a secret," I said. My voice was quiet. I didn't want the neighbors involved. "She's a person, and she's not yours. She's mine." He stepped back, opening the door wider. He let me in. The house was half empty, boxes stacked in the hallway. He was ready to run again. He had been packing since the moment I'd collected Maisie from school. I walked into the sitting room. I didn't sit down. I looked at him. "The clinic," I said. "Manchester, 2017. Tell me how you did it." He looked away. He ran his hands through his hair. That gesture I remembered, the one he did when he was working through a problem. "You'd already signed the consultation forms," he said. "The consent documents covered retrieval, fertilization, surrogacy. You signed them all at the initial consultation. I signed them for a consultation, not for anything else. You were in the middle of the tower project," he said. "You signed everything the clinic gave you without reading it. I told them we were proceeding. I handled the rest." He said it quietly, as if it were merely an administrative matter he had handled on my behalf. "You found a surrogate," I said. "Yes. You produced a child using my genetic material, without my knowledge or my consent. And then you left me and took her." He looked up. His eyes were desperate. "I wanted a family, Cara. I wanted our family. And I knew you would wait. You would have said not yet, not now after this project, after I make partner. And then one day it would have been too late. I did it for us. I did it because I loved. You did it for you," I said. "You would have chosen your career over her," he said, and his voice had hardened now. "You always chose work first. You're controlled. You're cold. You don't let people in. You would have seen it as a disruption to your plan." He was using the things he knew about me, the things he had said he loved. He was turning them into evidence of my inadequacy, building his defense, trying to make himself the one who understood what I needed better than I did. "You think I'm cold," I said. I looked at him for a long moment. This man. This thief who had once traced my scar with his thumb and called it his favorite part. "I was never dangerous," I said very quietly, "until now." I turned around. I walked to the front door. "Cara, wait." His voice was cracked. "What are you going to do? Are you going to the police?" I stopped. I didn't turn around. "I'm going to fix what you broke," I said. I got in my car and drove back to Bristol. I did not go to the police. I went to the best family law solicitor in Bristol. Her name was Diane Forsyth. She had an office in a Georgian building on Queen Square with a view across the garden. She was in her early 60s, white hair, a charcoal suit that probably cost a great deal, and the sort of composed authority that comes from having been absolutely right about things for a very long time. I sat in a leather chair across from her and I did not cry. I was an architect presenting a case study. I opened my file. "This is a DNA test result," I said, placing it on the desk. "It shows I am the 99.97% probable biological mother of a child currently in my care, named Maisie Renshaw, aged 5. Next document. These are hospital records from the Bristol Royal Infirmary, dated June of last year. They record a woman presenting herself as Cara Whitfield giving birth to an infant in the maternity unit. The nursing notes describe the patient as anxious and volatile, refusing to identify the father, claiming she feared for the child's safety. Next document. This is my complete work itinerary for the same week, including rail tickets, hotel receipts, meeting confirmations, and client correspondence. I was in London for a commercial pitch from the 12th to the 16th. I could not have been simultaneously admitted to a maternity ward in Bristol. Next document. This is a private investigator's report showing the child's registered father, Marcus Renshaw, currently residing in Cheltenham, having abandoned the child at her primary school 10 days ago. He is the same man listed as the father on the school enrollment form, which also bears a forged version of my signature. Last document. This is a subject access request I submitted to the Manchester Fertility Clinic, where I attended a consultation in 2017. The clinic has confirmed that my genetic material was retrieved following my initial consent form signature, but that all subsequent procedures, the fertilization, creation of the embryo, and transfer to a surrogate, were authorized by Marcus Renshaw using a forged spousal consent form. The clinic believed they were acting on my behalf. They were not. Diane Forsyth read everything. She did not speak for nearly 15 minutes. She took off her reading glasses. She pressed the bridge of her nose. "Miss Whitfield," she said, "in 30 years of practice I have seen a great deal. I have not seen this. This is an extraordinary and deliberately constructed crime. The level of premeditation—" "I know what it is," I said. "What I need to know is what I can do." She met my eyes. "What do you want?" "I want full, sole, and permanent custody. I want his name removed from her birth certificate. I want him to have no legal rights over her whatsoever. I want him to be unable to make a single decision about her life. I want him entirely erased from her legal record." Diane Forsyth nodded slowly. "We can do that. We use the criminal liability as leverage. He either agrees to a full, voluntary surrender of parental rights, or we refer everything to the Crown Prosecution Service and he faces charges. Given the evidence, those charges would be substantial." She drafted 2 documents. The first was a 58-page petition for sole custody detailing every element of what Marcus had done. It included the DNA results, the hospital records, my London alibi, the PI report, the clinic's confirmation of the forged consent forms. It was comprehensive and devastating. It was the weapon. The second was 2 pages. A voluntary agreement to surrender all parental rights, with no contest, no conditions. It was the alternative. 3 days later, I drove back to Cheltenham. This time I was not looking for answers. I was delivering the outcome. I rang the bell. He answered. He looked worse than before, gray-faced, sleepless. The kind of hollow that comes from having spent days sitting with what you've done. He saw the large envelope in my hands. "What is this?" he said. "Paperwork," I said. I handed him the thick folder. He opened it. He turned the first page, read the heading, turned to the DNA test result. His face went ash-white. He turned again. The hospital records, my London itinerary, the fertility clinic affidavit, the words fraud, identity theft, child abduction. He had to lean against the wall. "You can't," he said. "Cara, please." "I already have," I said. A small lie, but it worked. The hearings listed. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the hallway floor, the pages spreading around him. "She's his voice broke. "She is everything to me. You can't just. You took me, I said. You took my choice. You took my name and my body and my future. You built a life on a foundation of lies. Marcus, and the foundation just gave way. You don't get to speak to me about taking. He was weeping properly now. Undone. The brilliant, controlled man who had engineered all of this, who had forged signatures and paid surrogates and told stories to a small girl about her sick, absent mother. He was sitting on a hallway floor surrounded by paper. I held out the second envelope, the 2-page document. "What's that?" he whispered. "This is your choice," I said. "You sign this, you agree voluntarily to surrender all parental rights with no contest. Or that folder," I gestured to the scattered pages, "goes to the CPS. And Maisie grows up visiting her father in a prison visiting room. On your terms." He looked at the pen. He looked at me. "You're doing this to hurt me." "No, Marcus." I crouched very slightly so that for just a moment we were level. "I'm doing this so that Maisie never learns how to lie the way you do." He took the pen. His hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible. He signed away his daughter. I took the document. I put it in my bag. I stood up. "Cara." His voice was barely audible. "Will I? Will she ever want to see me?" I looked back. "When she's old enough to understand everything, I'll tell her the truth. What she does with it will be up to her." I walked out. I did not look back. 3 weeks later, the family court hearing took place in a modern building in Bristol city centre that smelled of instant coffee and old carpet. Diane Forsyth had called it a consent hearing. The outcome was settled. We were there to make it official. I wore a dark gray blazer. I had Maisie with Jess for the day. Walking into the building, I passed Marcus in the corridor. He was with a young solicitor who looked like he'd had better mornings. Marcus looked like a man who had been gradually disappearing for weeks and was nearly gone. He glanced at me. He looked away first. We went before a family court judge, a woman in her late 50s, with the quietly authoritative manner of someone who has made decisions that matter every single working day of her career. She opened the file. She read in silence for several minutes. I watched her expression move from routine attention to something more focused. She looked up. She looked at Marcus. "Mr. Renshaw," she said. Her voice was measured and very cold. "I have reviewed the contents of this petition with considerable care. The conduct described is among the most calculated I have encountered in a family court proceeding. You should be aware that you are fortunate this is not a criminal hearing." Marcus did not raise his head. The judge turned to his solicitor. "And there is no contest. You are confirming voluntary surrender." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Renshaw surrenders all parental rights in full." The judge looked at Diane, at me. "Miss Whitfield, the court has reviewed the evidence in support of your petition. The court finds in favor of the applicant. Full sole and permanent legal and physical custody is hereby granted to Cara Whitfield." The parental rights of Marcus Renshaw are terminated in their entirety. The order to amend the birth register is approved. The child's legal name will be recorded as Maisie Whitfield. She picked up her pen. She signed the order. The sound of the stamp on the final document was small and absolute. That sound. That one small, bureaucratic sound. It was the sound of the phone call being answered, and answered properly this time. It was the sound of the forged signature being erased. It was the sound of the school corridor and the dark bench, and the rabbit rucksack. It was the sound of everything being made true. I sat very still for a moment. Then I stood. Diane touched my arm. "Congratulations, Cara." I walked out of the courtroom. I walked past Marcus, past the gray, diminished man sitting in a beige corridor. And I did not look at him. I walked through the main doors of the building and out into the November air. It was cold and sharp and the sky was very bright. I stood on the pavement and I breathed. It was over. Now I had to go and collect my daughter. I picked Maisie up from Jess's house on the other side of Clifton. The moment she saw my car, she came running. She hit my legs at speed, arms around my knees, face buried in my coat. "Did you win your meeting?" she said into my coat. I knelt down. I held her face between both hands. Those gray-green eyes. My eyes. "Yes," I said. "I won." She beamed. "Can we have pasta tonight?" "We can have whatever you want." That was Maisie's 6th year. Time moved on the way it does, in the way that is at once slower and faster than you expect it to be. My flat was no longer gray. The concrete and glass and careful minimalism I had curated for years was thoroughly undone. The coffee table had been relocated to the hallway as Maisie had originally recommended and replaced with a small purple beanbag she'd chosen herself. The walls, which had held precisely framed architectural drawings, were now partially covered in drawings of horses, drawings of me, drawings of a yellow house, with a garden and a very large dog. My bookshelves had been reorganized according to a logic I was never fully able to decode. I was still an architect. I still left for work in the mornings, but I left at 5:30 now, not 8:30. I had designed a children's library in Bedminster last year. I had known exactly what height the reading nooks should be. I knew exactly how wide the picture book shelves ought to be. Maisie laughed like her father. That was the part that remained. Sometimes I would hear it from her room, a sudden, full, unguarded laugh, and for a fraction of a second my whole body would recognize it, and something inside me would clench. It passed quickly. But it was there. Her eyes were mine. When she was frustrated by something, a puzzle with a piece that didn't fit, a drawing that wouldn't look the way she'd imagined it, she went quiet and focused and determined, and it was entirely, completely me. She was stubborn and bright, and she made friends slowly but completely. She refused to eat peas. She loved building things. Lego, wooden blocks, anything she could stack and order and design. When Jess's daughter, Freya, knocked over one of her constructions, Maisie didn't shout. She looked at the wreckage, looked at Freya, and said, "That's all right. I'll build a better one." She was mine, but there were the hard nights. She had nightmares sometimes. I would hear her, go to her room, sit on the edge of her bed. She would be half awake and frightened, and she would say, "I want Daddy." Those were the longest nights. "I want Daddy. He's on his long trip, Maisie. He's not coming back." Did I do something bad? No, Maisie, I'd say, fierce and certain. You are perfect. This is not your fault. This was a grown-up mistake. I resented him for that specifically. For making me the one to deliver the absence. For making me the one to manage the grief he had authored. Then, about a year after the court date, we were at a park near the suspension bridge on a clear Sunday in November. Maisie was on the swings. I was pushing her. "Higher," she said. "Higher." "Mummy?" I pushed her higher. She was laughing. Then, I stopped the swing. She sat in it, rocking slightly, thinking. "Mummy," she said. "Was I bad?" My heart stopped. "No, why would you ever think that?" "Because Daddy left. And you didn't come for a long time." There it was. The wound he had planted in her simply by doing what he did. I went around to the front of the swing. I crouched in the wood chip so I was level with her face. "Maisie," I said, "I didn't come for a long time because I didn't know where to find you." The simplest truth. Daddy made a mistake, a very big mistake. He didn't tell me where you were. It was like a terrible game of hide and seek, except I didn't even know we were playing. I put my hand on her chest, over her heart. "The second I found out where you were, the second I got the phone call from your school, I ran. I ran as fast as I could." "You came to school," she said. "I will always come," I said. She searched my face. Then she leaned forward and put her arms around my neck. "I love you, Mummy. I love you, Maisie." She slid off the swing. "Can I go on the climbing frame?" "Go on," I said. I sat on the bench and watched her scramble up the climbing frame with absolute conviction and no plan whatsoever. I knew this wasn't the end of the questions. One day she would be 11, 12, 15. The questions would become harder. They would require the whole truth, the clinic, the surrogate, the hospital records, the forged forms, all of it, and I would tell her. I would find the words when she was ready for them. I would not protect her from the truth because the truth was the only foundation worth standing on. I was an architect. I did not build on lies. It was Maisie's 6th birthday. The flat was in a state of spectacular, glorious chaos. Purple and yellow streamers were taped to the ceiling with theatrical optimism. There was flour on every surface in the kitchen. I was making a birthday cake from a box because that was the honest limit of my baking ability, and Maisie was assisting, which meant she had significantly more icing on her face than on any horizontal surface. She was laughing. I was laughing. The flat smelled of sugar and something I had accidentally burned earlier that had been quietly removed to the bin. This was it. This was the ordinary miracle. This messy, loud, brightly colored life. My phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on my jeans and looked at the screen. Marcus Renshaw. He called sometimes, once every few months, the way distant storms pass across a forecast. Noted, taken into account, moved on from. The first time he'd called, my hands had shaken. The second time, I'd felt a flash of anger. Now I felt almost nothing. A kind of weather, the ghost of a structure that had been properly demolished. "Who is it, Mummy?" Maisie asked, her mouth full of icing. I looked at her. "Those eyes. No one important, sweetheart." I pressed the red button. The screen went dark. "Now then," I said. "Do we do the sprinkles before or after the candles?" "Before," said Maisie, with the absolute conviction of an expert. "Before it is." The party was over. The flat was quiet. I had removed icing from 3 different surfaces and found streamers in places I could not fully account for. Maisie was in bed, her rabbit. The one from the very first night, the one that had sat on a school corridor bench tucked under her arm. I stood in her doorway. I do this every night. It's become its own kind of ritual. I stand there, and I watch her breathe, and I let the truth of it settle over me. She is safe. She is here. She is in her room, in her bed, under her duvet, with her rabbit and her steady small breaths. She is not on a bench in a dark school corridor. She is not a secret. She is not a forged signature on a form I never signed. She is mine. Standing there in her doorway, I realized that the rage was gone. For the first time since that Tuesday in October 3 years ago, when my mobile buzzed with an unknown number and an exhausted woman's voice told me something impossible. The ice was gone. The cold, clear, precise fury that had carried me through the private investigator and Diane Forsyth's office, and a fam courtroom, and a hallway in Cheltenham. It had melted. In its place was something quieter. Something that had no dramatic name. Not happiness exactly, though happiness was in it. Something more structural than that. The feeling of a completed building at the moment the last scaffold comes down, and you see the thing standing on its own, whole, exactly as designed. I thought about Marcus. He thought he was taking something from me. He thought he was punishing my ambition, my drive, my self-sufficiency, the things he used to say he loved, and then later used as evidence of coldness. He thought he could write me out of a story and write himself in. He was wrong. He didn't steal my life. He gave me one. He didn't take my future. He gave it to me. He didn't break me. He introduced me to what I was made of. Because in the end, what I found in a dark school corridor, in a small hand that fitted into mine with an impossible naturalness, in a gray-green pair of eyes that were entirely my own, what I found was the only version of myself that no one could ever take. I was already whole. I just hadn't known where to look. I pulled Maisie's door until there was just a small strip of light from the hallway. I went to my room. I got into bed. And for the first time in 6 years, I fell into a sleep that had no edges to it. Deep, dreamless, complete. The nightmare was over. If you've been watching with us tonight on Serene Drama Stories, thank you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.